All right, so it says, quick review. Domain is, what is domain? Somebody raise their hand and tell me, what does domain mean? Bennett. It is the x values. Okay? And Luke, tell me, what is the range? All the y values. Very good. All the y values. Now it says, state the domain and range for each relation. Determine if each relation is a function. Now notice, ladies and gentlemen, this is not a line. This is just some random points. Can we agree with that? Could I theoretically draw a line to connect them? Of course, we can always do that. I'm going to do it just to show you. And I've done that. But what I want you to understand, though, is that not every single point on this line would make this come true. There are specific points for a reason. And the reason I say that is because since this is not a linear line, there is no slope to this line. These are random points. Imagine that these are the amount of points that Carter scored in a game. And I understand that, like, yes, there's a -2. That just means that he did really bad that game. He scored on the wrong basket. Then one game he had 1 point, one game he had -2 points again, and just so on and so forth. So there are specific points to that. Do you understand? So when I ask you what is the domain, we're going to literally list out the x value for this point, the x value for this point, the x value for this point, and the x value for this point. Does that make sense? So this first point right here, my x value is -2. This point right here, what is my x value going to be? It's on the y-axis. 0. It's on the y-axis. Right here? 2. And then this last one, 3. Questions on how I found the domain for that problem? Again, do we understand that because there were specific points, that's why we went with the exact points there? Okay, for the range, we're going to do the exact same thing. What is the y value of this point right here? 2. What is the y value of this point? 1. What about this one? -1. I know it's kind of hard to see. And then finally, what about this one? 3. Is everybody okay with that? Questions there? All right, now let's do a little review here. Is this a function?
No. Yes.
No.
Ooh, split down the middle. Katie, go.
Because as an x value, it has 3 and it
That's okay. We can allow that to happen. Stephen, what do you think?
The x values aren't repeating, so it's a function.
Notice, ladies and gentlemen, my x values never repeat. And if my x values never repeat, then we know that for a fact this is a function. Okay, the x value can only have one y value, meaning they cannot repeat. So this is a function. All right, here we go. We got a triangle here. Okay? Now for this triangle, we are also trying to determine what the domain and the range are. Now, once again, this is not a straight linear line, so we're only going to focus on the points that it's giving me. Do we understand? So here's a point, basically all the vertexes, all the vertices. Okay? So my domain is going to be -4, -2, and what?
0.
Is everybody okay with that? Okay? My y value is going to be 0 and what? And do I have to put this 0 again over here? I don't have to. If you wanted to, like if Tommy was just feeling it and he was like, I really want to write the number 0 again, I'm not going to mark it wrong, but that would just be a waste of your time, right? Is everybody okay with that? Okay, let me ask you this. Is this a function?
Yes.
Hayden?
No, because -2 will repeat.
Because -2 will repeat. This -2?
Yes.
Do we agree?
Yes.
Do you guys remember the vertical line test?
Yes.
Vertical line test was, if you take this marker or this pen and I run it across, is there any point that I cross the line twice?
Yes.
Quite often I do, right? So is this a function? No. Okay, good. Now you could argue, or you could ask me, well, but the x values don't repeat on the top domain. Correct, because of the points, but if I started to break it down and become more specific, the x value would repeat. We're just focusing on those 3 points for our domain and range. All right, here's a good one. Changing up we're not going to only focus on the points this time. This time we're going to talk about the continuation of the line. And so we're going to write this one a little bit differently. Okay, let's start with domain. Once again, our x values. What is the smallest x value you see on this line? What is the smallest x value you see? Ian, what do you see? -4 right here. Can we all agree that this is my smallest one?
Yes.
Okay? And what is the greatest x value that we see, Bennett?
4.
+4. Good. Now, I'm going to write something. I want you just to bear with me as I write it. We'll talk about it and I'll explain it, but I want you to see what I'm going to write first. Can anybody tell the class why I'm putting an x in between these two numbers? Katie? Because what? No, Zoe, why?
Because of like the next values are everything between.
Yeah, we're talking about domain, right? And so when we're talking about domain, we're going to put x's. Now, we're just going to skip a second. What do you think I'm going to put for range? Y. Good. Okay, good. Okay, now on Friday, I gave you 3 vocabulary words. Domain, range, and what was the third one? Does anybody remember? Steven?
Inequality.
Inequalities. And inequalities are those greater than or less than symbols. Do we agree? So here's what I want you to see. Read that inequality to me, Addison.
-4 is less than x.
Do we agree that -4 is the smallest value that x can be? So we agree that it can be -3 because -3 is greater than -4? Do we agree that -2 is greater than -4? We agree all these numbers to this point right here are going to be greater than -4. Okay? Let me ask you this. Evan, read that to me.
X is less than or equal to 4.
Do we agree that 2 is less than or equal to 4? Do we agree that 3 is less than or equal to 4? So does everybody understand how I wrote that? What I'm saying, smallest number, greatest number. That's all I'm doing there. Connor.
Why the x?
Because we're talking about domain, and domain is referring to all of the x values.
Oh,
Okay? Hayden.
is it like another word for function for like the y values? Like instead of an x value, is another word for function for y values?
Yeah, you could say that. You could definitely say that. All right, now let me ask you this, my last question. Why does this one not have the equal to sign, and why does this one have the equal to sign? Luke.
Because the first circle is open, the other one is closed.
So what that means is that we're not including -4. We're saying x has to be greater than -4. It can't be -4. On the +4, though, we're saying it's allowed to be a 4 there. Are we okay with that? Well, let's try the range now. What is the smallest value on my y-axis here? What is the smallest possible value that I can have? JT? 0. What is the greatest possible y value I can have in this? Again, when you're looking at this picture, hear me on this. Everybody hear me on this. All I'm looking at right now is this line right here. That's all I'm looking at. What is the highest possible value that I can have? Tommy? +4. So what I'm telling you is 0 is less than or equal to y, because again, I've got the closed circle. We're all okay there. And it's also less than or equal to 4, because on this one, I do have a closed one. Can we understand that?
Why don't you use the other dot?
It's a great question. Would anybody like to answer Hayden on that? He says, why don't I use the other dot? Why don't I use the other dot? What do you think, Connor?
Is he talking about the middle?
Yeah.
I would just ask him to clarify, not, I don't get it.
What he's asking is, why do I have a less than or equal to sign?
So I'm asking why aren't we gonna use the other one?
He's saying, why am I not saying it's just less than because this one's open, but this one is closed? Is that correct? Let me ask you this, Hayden. If one of them is closed, doesn't that mean we get to include that number? So whether this one has it or not, it's still encompassing everything beneath that. Same way, even though I don't have a 2 right here, don't we agree that 2 is a possibility for y because this part of the line is right here? It's the same thing. That's all it is. Does that make sense? Cool. Let's try one more. I think I have 1 or 2 more, and then we're going to do a couple word problems. All right, here we go. Let's talk about this one. Let's do domain first. Anybody want to take a shot at my domain? Take a shot at my domain here. Steven, what do you got?
All real numbers.
All real numbers. What do these arrows mean?
Goes on.
Goes on forever, never, never, right? So again, I could do that example where I draw the lines going all the way across the board, but it's going to be all real numbers. So literally you could just write all real numbers. Okay? Now, what's my range going to be? What's the smallest value my range is going to be? Smallest value we're going to have charger.
Negative 2.
-2. Okay, I'm going to go and put my y there. What's my biggest value of my range going to be? JT? 3. And am I going to have equal to or less than? I'm sorry, greater than, equal to, or just greater than, or less than, equal to? Yeah, we're going to have the equal to because I have the closed circles. Are we okay with that?
Yes, sir.
Finally, is this a function?
Yes.
Yeah, it is. If I do the vertical line test, notice it never double laps. Okay? How much time I got left on my video? Oh, great. We're good. Okay, we can finish this and I'll make a separate video for the word problems. Okay, here you go. You've got 2 lines here. 2 lines. This is not one that we're going to see a ton of on test, but I at least want you to be aware of how these ones work. With there being 2 lines, we're just going to interpret this as one entire figure. Meaning, imagine that the domain range is referring to everything put together. So notice that how they overlap. Does that make sense? So like the domain for this is going to basically be all real numbers because we're going to assume that these arrows are going on forever and ever since they don't have a point on the end of them. Does that make sense? Same thing with the range. We know that my range, the highest the range can go is 4, but it can also be everything below that. Does that make sense? Again, you're not going to see a question with 2 lines on your test. I'm not going to quiz you over that. I'm not going to test you over that. I just want you to be aware of kind of what they look like and understanding that it's still everything. Cool? All right, let me stop the video. I'm going to open up the second